Were you ever thinking of having an abortion just on the fear that maybe there'll be more wrong things that may happen?
It's taken me a long time to process it, to be totally transparent with you. Like if you had asked me the question you just asked me back in 2018, I would only give you the answer I just gave you. But now, 3.5 years later, lots of hours of therapy and just sort of personal meditation and honesty with myself, I realized that there was a lot of grieving that I never did. Parents of children with disabilities do that sometimes is because I think there's a fear that if you grieve or you feel sad, that in some way that means you're ashamed. And that couldn't be further from the truth. You have to be honest with yourself about how you feel. And that doesn't mean that you don't love your child. That doesn't mean that you don't care about your child. It means that you are being the most authentic version of yourself. And then through that, you can be the best parent you possibly can be. So I know that was sort of a long-winded answer. It's easy to say a lot of times things like, oh, I'm pro-choice, which I am. But until you're faced with a situation where that comes up, and I remember almost feeling insulted that this person thought that I would be willing to take the risk of my child's life just to know if there were other things potentially present in terms of other disabilities or other syndromes that she may have. As a parent of a child with a disability, I'm not afraid of like my daughter being capable. I see what she's capable of every single day. But what I'm nervous about are the people that she will interact with. For me, it's this constant debate over like, how many pictures of my child on Instagram and Facebook are too much? Because, she has no say in whether or not her image is out there in the world. I was a parent who genuinely was curious and wanted to learn how to be the best advocate and the best ally that I possibly can be, and was also okay feeling uncomfortable, was also okay and still am okay getting it wrong, toxically positive when we found out about Emerson. But I also don't think I was totally honest with myself. My trauma, as I mentioned earlier. And so maybe if you looked at us on the surface back in 2018, it might have appeared that Danny was handling all of it perfectly fine. But I wasn't. I didn't know that. I had this sort of breakthrough moment in therapy where I realized that I was afraid of how the world was going to treat my daughter, that it really started opening up the conversation between my wife and myself. And I don't know.
Hello, welcome to my podcast, Mics One JoeySooch. I'll be giving a mic to Danny Jordan. Danny is the producer and director of over 150 hours of primetime networks. While that is challenging enough, he was exposed to an entire new world where his daughter was born with an upper limb difference. We'll get way more into that in a little bit, but it's a pleasure to have you today.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Joe. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for sliding up in my DMs and inviting me to be a part of your show.
Don't say that. It was.
Well, it wasn't in a creepy way.
No.
Why does sliding have all of a sudden the word sliding has this like negative connotation upon it?
Because always the male female dynamic and like
right.
That goes into it. So I know.
So what word should we use? Did you like hop up? Did you jump into my DMs?
There's really no other way to do it either. I did hit you up, I guess, but that's like
hit me up. I don't know. you in a very classy manner. You reached out to me on Instagram.
That's how you know when we're getting old, when we have like variations of sliding into DMs now.
That's true. What was like the old school? I guess you would like pass a note back in school.
Like, pass a note. Give me a ring. Give me a holler.
Yeah, page me.
I thought we used to have these phones connected to the walls.
What are you talking about, Joe? Joe, I'm not that old. Come on. No, did you ever have a pager, Joe?
No, I didn't. I'm a little bit younger than that.
Oh, so you're trying to tell me I'm old now?
Well, I grew up with it, but like I was just too young, and then by the time I had like a cell phone, it was like fading out. But yeah. I do see it kind of often sometimes in like hospitals. Those are still reliable sources.
Totally. When I look back on having a pager, I wonder what in the world I was thinking. I think I only had a pager just because other kids had pagers, so I felt like I needed to have one, but nobody was paging me. Like there was no, my mom, like she knew where I was. She dropped me off like at church. Like she didn't need to page me to get a hold of me. And then there was this whole thing of, this was like early days of text messaging. I'm sure some of your listeners who are in my age demo, the mid to late 30s crew will know that we invented something called pager code, which was you would page somebody, but it was sort of like a text message where letters were represented by numbers. So if I wanted to say hey to you, I would text you. It was 434 was hey. And then you could say words to people via like W would be, I think it was 111 was W, or like 177 was the letter M. So you would send people messages in text, and then you had like your code that you would put at the end so they knew that it was from you. So like mine was 9, but like a friend of mine might be 17. So you knew when you got a text, it's like, hey buddy, 17. Oh, that's from my buddy Josh. It was so archaic and so silly. And like you would slip out like at youth group at church and try to find a payphone to like text somebody back just to text them, hey. It was so silly and so ridiculous. And now I feel incredibly old. So thank you, Joe.
Yeah, we're going to stick to the English language for today. No numbers.
Oh, that's hysterical.
So we're gonna establish. So we're not talking about pagers. I know we did throughout the whole topic here, but so your wife is 22 weeks pregnant. Your daughter is diagnosed with an upper limb difference. What is going through your mind at the time?
Wow, that's a big switch from pager talk of the 90s to real life talk of 2018.
Well, you can't talk about your daughter of all these weird things you used to do when you were younger.
I know. I'm gonna deliver my answer all in pager code. So yeah, back in just to give your listeners perspective, as you mentioned, back in 2018, my wife was pregnant with our first daughter, Emerson, and everything with the pregnancy was progressing quote unquote normally, as they might say. And then at about 21 weeks, we went in for an ultrasound, with the radiology department, and we got a call a couple of days later saying there were some concerns over some imagery that came up. So they sent us to see a specialist, a perinatologist. And during a 2.5-hour ultrasound with that specialist, she confirmed that one of the bones in our daughter's right forearm never grew. They didn't know why then, and they still don't know why to this day. It's an isolated incident. It doesn't appear to be syndromatic, but as you can imagine, and as I'm sure your listeners can relate, it was shocking information and not something that we were expecting. But for me, in that moment, as you shared, I've been working as a television producer for many, many years. And I think I looked at that as a storyteller, as an opportunity to sort of use my skill set, use my connections, use my voice to try to contribute something to the world that would make this world more inclusive and empowering. And so I created this children's book series. But I'll tell you, like on the raw side, to be totally transparent with you and not just give you like a static answer of like, we had bad news and here's how I use that energy. It's taken me a long time to process it, to be totally transparent with you. Like if you had asked me the question you just asked me back in 2018, I would only give you the answer I just gave you. But now, 3.5 years later, lots of hours of therapy and just sort of personal meditation and honesty with myself, I realized that there was a lot of grieving that I never did. I think a lot of times, at least me being a type A personality and always wanting to fix things and make things right, I wanted to make the situation better, but I never gave myself the opportunity in that moment to grieve the loss of this child, like in a sense, when you are about to have a child, inevitably you start writing a story in your mind as to how you think their life is going to unfold. And that story didn't happen with Emerson. And I didn't grieve that loss. And I think the reason that we, as parents of children with disabilities, do that sometimes is because I think there's a fear that if you grieve or you feel sad, that in some way that means you're ashamed. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I love my daughter and I'm so incredibly proud of her and I'm not ashamed of her whatsoever. But I think sometimes we as humans associate feelings of sadness or disappointment with shame. And I think it's imperative, I think it's critical that parents of children with disabilities, whether they are congenital, whether they're born with those disabilities or they're acquired, you have to be honest with yourself about how you feel. And that doesn't mean that you don't love your child. That doesn't mean that you don't care about your child. it means that you are being the most authentic version of yourself. So, and then through that, you can be the best parent you possibly can be. So I know that was sort of a long-winded answer to your question, but been a lengthy process to sort of find my truth within it all.
Yeah, of course. It's difficult because it throws a huge wrench into your plans. And kids having, I'm not a parent and won't want to be a parent. So, but like, I can totally see the challenges just having a child it is. And then now you're having this a disabled child, the best way to put it. And then that changes things even more. And then now, but like, how did your wife feel? Like, that, was there any questions of shame of the person? Because like the first thing everyone thinks of is themselves, like, oh, I deserve this, or like, I drank too many cups of wine, or like they blame it themselves, like I'm the one giving birth to the child because it's like my fault that the child it is the way it is.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, and I think that's more of a question for my wife than for myself because that's her truth, that's her story. I think. Inevitably, when you find out news like this, you do start asking yourself questions about like, oh, did this run in my family? And I just didn't know, because when we found out about Emerson, a lot of times when children are born with limb differences, there are other issues that can present as well. And a lot of times they are soft tissue issues, and those can be issues with the heart, those can be issues with the esophagus or the trachea. And the reality is when the child is still in utero, you can't see soft tissue on ultrasound. So a lot of this isn't revealed until the child is born. And so for us, like, it's a catch-22 because you are grateful that you're empowered with this information about one aspect of your child's life so you can start to educate yourself. I mean, that's really what I took this as an opportunity to do, was to educate myself. But then there's still so many questions because you just don't know, is my daughter going to have issues with her esophagus? Might she be born with a heart defect? And to take it back a little bit further, earlier in the year, at the beginning of 2018, we experienced a real traumatic event with a niece that was born on New Year's Day, who was born with an undiagnosed heart condition. She had two holes in her heart, and unfortunately, and I'll say this as a trigger warning for anyone who's maybe lost a child. This might be a good time to skip ahead a little bit in this podcast, but we lost our niece 8 days after she was born with an undiagnosed heart condition. And I think for me, one, we experienced this traumatic event, but knowing that there was a heart condition with a family member, and then them telling us that there could potentially be heart issues with our daughter because she was presenting with a limb difference, there was a lot of fear tied to everything within that pregnancy. And the reality was we just didn't know until Emerson came.
All your thoughts are totally valid and doesn't invalidate you of being a bad parent, just whoever you're thinking. But were you ever thinking of having an abortion just on the fear that maybe there'll be more wrong things that may happen?
I'm glad you bring that question up. Nobody's ever asked me that before. A lot of the questions I've received, because I wrote this children's book, and a lot of people, I think, just see pictures of us and hear our story, and they think, oh, this hero dad, wrote a book for his daughter with a disability, and that's not.
I'm here to ask the hard-hitting questions,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
And I'm also disabled too, so I think a lot of people are afraid to even ask that.
No, I appreciate the question because the reality was when we finished our appointment with the perinatalogist, they sent us down the hallway to meet with a genetic counselor. And I remember sitting in that room, and, obviously I had never been to therapy before in my life prior to that. So I didn't really understand the structure of these sorts of conversations. Not that I didn't understand it, I just wasn't accustomed to it. And I remember the genetic counselor had asked us, she said, would you like, I'm going to totally blank on the term for what this test is, but they, at that point they can do a test they basically stick a needle into the sac, and they're able to, withdraw blood and whatever to see if there might be any other things going on with your child. But that test has like a 1 in 750 chance of causing a miscarriage. And I asked her, I said, well, why, if there's a 1 in 750 chance, like why? Because it could essentially, when the sac is compromised like that, the body sometimes can get tricked into, oh, now it's time to go into labor. And because, our child was only 21 weeks at that point, odds are she wasn't going to make it. And so I asked them, I said, well, why would anyone do that when the odds are that low? And she said to me, she goes, well, or to my wife and myself, she said, because some people are trying to determine if they want to continue forward with the pregnancy. And if there are other, issues present, that might inform their decision. And I'll say that I am a supporter of, I'm pro-choice. I think it's up to any individual what they would like to do with their body. But I remember in that moment, it's easy to say a lot of times things like, oh, I'm pro-choice, which I am. But until you're faced with a situation where that comes up, and I remember almost feeling insulted that this person thought that I would be willing to take the risk of my child's life just to know if there were other things potentially present in terms of other disabilities or other syndromes that she may have. Because for me in that moment, I thought, you could tell me that my child had no legs and no arms. It's not going to change my decision. Like, I love this child. She is part of me. It took us 3 years to get pregnant. We did in vitro for her to even be here. Like, nothing is changing my mind in this moment. Why would you think that I would even consider the idea of abortion? But I also understand that not everybody's like me. Not everyone's wired like me. Not everyone, may be able to handle mentally, emotionally, financially, whatever might come from, bringing a child into this world that maybe has, elevated needs in terms of disability. So for me, I never considered it because I felt so connected to Emerson, and I believed that like her story needed to exist in this world. So that question never entered my mind, but it was a question that was asked of us. And, again, the second she asked us, it was an immediate no. It was never in consideration for me, but I can understand, having gone through what we went through and seeing what so many other parents go through, how that might be an option that you have to think on.
No, it's definitely a hard decision to do. Like, it's a very selfish, but also unselfish, depending on how you look at it. You can go with selfish that you want to have a child just because you want to have a child, but then you may be giving a child a lot more hardship that a person shouldn't be giving. But then it could be unselfish that you don't have the child, because then you don't want the child to suffer. But everyone says, oh, you should have accepted kid how they are and such. So it's very conflicting, but it's always interesting just to see where people's mind go to. But I think everyone's mind goes to a kind of a dark place in terms of it's a conflicting of, their moral code, if their religious code, the hospital code, the friends around them. Yeah. There's so much happening. You're also on a timer to make a decision, because if you wait 2 more weeks, the baby's growing even more, and then maybe you find something new, and it's like, what do? You can't think about it, and no one can give you the right answer either. It's up to you.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a right answer, because to say that there's a right answer means that applies to everybody, and I think we all have different life experiences. We all, like you said, have different morals, religious background, whatever it might be. And so for me in that sort of situation, because I've been there, because I've been through it, I don't judge anyone who makes a decision one way or the other. And I don't think we can say that one way is right and one way is wrong, because it's not that simple. I know I made a decision based off of who I am and based off of the life that I've lived and the way I felt in that moment. But also somebody else who hasn't lived the way that I lived and doesn't feel the way that I feel might wonder why I made the decisions that I made. And I don't want them to question me or think less than me because of what I did or didn't do in that situation. It's then not fair for me to then in turn judge them, So I think it has to be a judgment-free zone, and we have to understand that everybody has their own life experience that they bring into those moments. And
we can judge a little bit, I'm not I think there's always room for opinion. Just it's up to you, and then The other thing really is that it's easier for someone to say, "I'll just have the baby" and such, but they're not given the responsibility of raising a child, dealing with all the negative things like this. For one, no parent ever showcases every single hardship about it. And then
Right.
two, it's hard just being in it. It's just you have to worry about the kid. They'll just say, do this, do that, and then go to sleep. And I'm sure you've been up for many nights just caring about the baby. And even with
Oh,
all
yeah.
the guidebooks out there, you're almost winging it at this point. Child
Oh, yeah.
with a limb different and child without a limb different. You're just winging it.
100%. 100%. You know, my wife and I have many conversations about this sort of topic of like winging it, because my wife is the type of person who's very structured. You know, she likes to have a schedule. She likes predictability. That makes her feel safe. For me, I'm the opposite. I love living very organically. I love letting the adventure of life sort of come to me. I'm sure that's why I like traveling so much. I'm sure that's why I like, hiking and that's why I've gone skydiving and bungee jumping and all these sorts of things. I'm an adrenaline junkie. Now, when it comes to parenting, that can be challenging, right? Because my wife wants things to be very structured, and I'm a lot more flexible. So it's a challenging road to navigate. And like you said, when you introduce the aspect of raising a child with a disability and knowing that this world is historically and still is not always the most kind when it comes to people who are different, whether that be because they have a visible or non-visible disability, or they're different in terms of race or sexuality or whatever it might be. The world is not always the most kind. And so I think that's a big part of the fear, at least for me as a parent of a child with a disability, is I'm not afraid of like my daughter being capable. I see what she's capable of every single day. But what I'm nervous about are the people that she will interact with. Because I've been a kid. I was a kid, and when I was in elementary school, I was, overweight for a little while, and then I had bad acne. And I remember what that was like to be teased for those things specifically, and how that made me feel. But I'm also a straight white male in America, and I'm in the majority. So like what I've had to face is nothing compared to other people. And I was able to do some push-ups and run a little bit more to not be the overweight kid. I was able to take Accutane to get rid of my acne. I got braces to make my teeth more straight. Certain things in life that people may pass judgment on based off the way people are born, they can't change that about themselves. And nor should they feel like they have to fit in or to be celebrated or to be the hero in the story.
You look like you just graduated from high school just now.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
you
you
think
have a
so?
very young complexion.
Oh, thank you it's funny you say that, because I've been looking at myself in the mirror lately, and I'm like, oh gosh, Danny, you're starting to, I'm about to be 40 this summer. So,
Oh, really? Wow, that's impressive. You can be one of those high school jocks, but they're like really 40 years old kind of people.
It's funny you say that, because I've had dreams before where like, and not too long ago, where like I'm back in high school, but I'm like older and I'm still playing baseball, but because I'm older, I'm better. And I'm faster and I'm stronger. But I feel like the coach is asking me like, hey, Danny, don't you think it's time for you to graduate high school? So I feel like maybe that's my subconscious telling me like, hey, maybe you got to grow up a little bit. I don't know.
Maybe. Are you one of those that like wear their high school jacket just for?
Oh gosh, no. I've moved past. Like if you looked at pictures of me in high school, Joe, I was so geeky in high school. I tried so hard. I wanted to be cool so badly. I wanted to be one of the cool guys, like so bad. Where that stemmed from, frankly, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out with my therapist. Why I always wanted to be like thought of as cool. I wanted to like buy the cool brands, like Billabong and Hurley, and I wanted to wear like the cool cargo shorts and the Van shoes or whatever was sort of cool at the time.
I mean, just a heads up, I don't think those were ever cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're not. I think they were tacky. I mean, I went through that phase, kind of that skater phase before, but
yeah.
I mean, I don't think it was really that cool because like I couldn't skate at all. Like I was just like,
no, neither could I. Oh,
Yeah,
I was not a skater. Like I was, people, you wear like a Billabong shirt and some like, shorts and Vans. And they're like, hey, you going surfing this weekend? You're like, I've never been surfing in my life.
No, it's definitely very cringy when you look back at it.
Oh, 100%. I bleached my hair. Like I had bleached like tips on the top. Now my hair just looks bleached because it's going gray. But I like to say I'm getting free highlights. But yeah, I was a very different person back then. And frankly, I don't know why I wanted to be thought of as cool, but I will say, and you'll appreciate this because you live in New York. I do remember when I think I was either working in New York back in like 2009, 2010, or I was just there for work. And I remember walking through Times Square, and those guys who like try to get you to buy their mixtapes and stuff. And, they'll like shout stuff at you. And I remember one of the guys one time was like, hey, cool guy. And Joe, thought I had made it. I was like, finally, somebody I don't know just sees me walking through New York City in Times Square with hundreds of thousands of people. And he says, look at that guy. That's a cool guy. So anyway, yeah, that's who I was back then and who I've become are very, very different. But I do appreciate your compliment in terms of me still.
No, I mean,
young, so thank you.
I mean, it applies to all guys. When they get a compliment, they like remember it for the rest of their life.
100%. Oh yeah.
If they complimented your shirt, you're gonna keep that shirt for the rest of your life.
Totally. I had one guy say, "Hey, cool guy," once. Another guy I remember said, "Hey, muscles," which felt really good. And then one guy said, "Hey, Seacrest," made me feel pretty cool as well because when I was, I don't know, back in like 2004, 2005, I wanted to be like the next Ryan Seacrest. So.
Have you dressed like him for Halloween?
I feel like I just dress like him every day.
You need to
does
do
that
like
to be Halloween?
Well, I'm sure you have maybe access to the American Idol stage that you can just do. And this is American Idol.
Actually, funny backstory. I don't know if you were able to dig this up in your research about me, but I worked. So when I first got into entertainment back in 2003, 2004, I worked at a radio station here in Southern California. And that radio station was Kiss FM, 102.7 Kiss FM. And I started at the bottom, like on the street team. And about 2 weeks before I started was when Ryan Seacrest took over the morning show. So I used to work at the same radio station as Ryan. So whenever I would go out and do like live events and I'd be on the mic, like getting the crowd hyped up, a lot of people thought I was Ryan. And then I got hired by American Idol to essentially be like the online Ryan Seacrest for this spinoff called American Idol Underground back in 2005. And I went on tour with the American Idol auditions. And so I would host this live stage and everyone, I'd be like, what's my name? They'd be like, Ryan. And I was like, no. It's sort of funny. And then I actually created a parody character of Seacrest called Decrest. And I used to say I was the taller, more affordable Seacrest was sort of my little joke that I used to do.
You
But
should have totally taken advantage of that situation. I'm sure you could walk into like a restaurant and just say you're Ryan Seacrest, and they would just accept you. Like that.
I feel like at this point it's more like Joel McHale. Like I feel like that one might be a little bit more believable at this point in time.
I know, but no one knows Joe McHale as much as Ryan Seacrest, though.
See, but that might work out in my favor because they'd be like, oh, he's Joel McHale. Okay. All right, I have no idea who that is, but apparently he thinks he's important, so let's give him a seat over here.
I don't know. It might. I don't know. It would make it a bit different, but Ryan Seacrest. Everyone knows who Ryan Seacrest is. Joe McHale.
That's true.
Not really.
Fair enough. Well, who else did I used to get Kevin Bacon sometimes. Back in the day, Kevin Bacon, Joel McHale, Seacrest, and I feel like that's someday I just want people to be like, hey, there's Danny Jordan. That would be like the old.
Oh, now you're doing the capables. I mean, you're based on it, but maybe your daughter will have a bigger presence than you.
Nothing would make me happier than for her to be the focus of everything. But also at the same time, I say that and I'm like, it's this constant debate you have as a parent. I think these days of. And I know this conversation is sort of like ping ponging all over the place, but I'm kind of liking it. I hope you are too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's this debate, and I'm sure if you have listeners out there who are parents, we live in this very interesting time where people share their story through social media, and especially over the last 2 years, just because you haven't been seeing people in person as much. And for me, it's this constant debate over like, how many pictures of my child on Instagram and Facebook are too much? Because, she has no say in whether or not her image is out there in the world. Yet here I am taking pictures of my daughter once a week or whatever and putting them up on Instagram and Facebook for the whole world to see. And she has no voice in that. And that's a tough one because it's my life too, but also shouldn't she have a say in that? And I do wonder, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when she finds out all of these images that we've shared of her from her childhood, is she going to be okay with that?
She'll send you to therapy, Bill.
Well, I'm already there. So, I think I'm good.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because, when you post your daughter, you never post her in a vulnerable situation, which I think, it doesn't matter to me, but in my case, my disease is so severe that there'll be parents that post their kids half naked, showing the effects of the disability. And I just posted hey, get the consent of the child to. I guess you want to spread awareness and such, but too, it's also their lives. They're being exposed and vulnerable, with their shirt off, and they definitely should have a say if it goes online. Just ask them. Even it is tough when they are young, but just ask them maybe every couple of months, hey, are you okay with this? Because their minds are changing all the time, and once it's online, it's forever.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because it's tough because I do see a lot of those images that you're referring to on social media, of parents of children with disabilities. And, I don't know how deep we want to go on this, Joe, but
we'll go as deep as you want to go. I'm here.
Yeah. It's tough because I understand that you want to advocate for your child, and I understand that there is this desire to normalize disability, right? And I think part of normalizing it is people just being exposed to it, and historically they just haven't been. But I think you have to be very mindful, and I think this is what you were alluding to, in terms of how you are positioning your child within the story of what you're sharing on social media. I don't post daily about Emerson's limb difference. I don't post intimate photos of when we went to her hand surgeon and stitches and all that sort of stuff, because frankly, I just don't think that's necessary. And frankly, I think that's, an invasion of her privacy. Now, if I post once a year, for Limb Difference Awareness Month or, Rare Disease Day, sort of my perspective as a parent and what I'm committed to doing, I feel like that's one thing. But I feel like when children are being put on display and being taken advantage of, that's when I have an issue. That's when I really, really have an issue.
And then to add to that is also how much you share where it's too much for the audience, because I know limb differences are not used to that, and I get that you want it to be more of the norm, but at the same time there's also a line of if it's just too much. They have a choice to, unfollow you, block you, whatever. Right. But sometimes you also have a responsibility to not share too much. So it's very conflicting, especially conflicting in my case. Do I not post due to caring about what other people think? But also it's really good and I have consent of myself. And in that situation, I did go because it's what I want to do. And if people don't like it, then that's kind of their problem at this point. So I did do whatever makes me happy, but I do understand that we kind of have a social responsibility of not unveiling the whole truth, because not everyone wants to see the devastations of disabilities or life in general. We can use the Ukrainian, it's not a war, right? I don't know what you call it right now, a battle.
Right.
But what is ever happening in Ukraine, it's do you show people getting murdered on TV? Right. What's the line of it?
Yeah, I think we are exposed to so much in terms of imagery nowadays, and
it doesn't even faze us anymore, which makes it sad in a way.
Yeah, we've almost become desensitized to traumatic events because, when there's school shootings or when there's war going on or a flood or tsunami or whatever it might be, it's you see all of this imagery in real time where not that long ago, 20 years ago, in our lifetimes, that wasn't happening. And if it was happening, well, the exposure to it visually, you were only seeing it on the news, right? It wasn't every time you picked up your phone or turned on your computer or whatever it was. It almost feels like trauma to an extent dominates our lives. And on one hand, I think it's important for us as humans to understand what is going on in the world so we can be more empathetic to other people and their experiences. But I also think we have to be so much more mindful of how much we are exposing our brains to every single day when we look at our phones, when we turn on the TV, whatever. I think the reason there's a rise in anxiety and depression in our world is frankly because one of how much we're exposed to from a trauma standpoint, but also just how much information our brains are having to process every single day. Somebody said to me recently, I was in a conversation with someone and they said, I feel like we've forgotten how to be bored. And I think that I noticed that in my own life, like it's really hard. I've always been an active person. I like being active. I like having things to do, but I could still chill out. I could still sit on the couch and watch a football game and just watch the football game. I could go to the park and lay in the grass and just lay in the grass and read a book or whatever. Now it's like I feel like my brain always needs to be doing something, always needs to be thinking about something, always needs to be sending an email or a text or refreshing my feed or whatever it is. And I think that's causing issues for us. And I think it's causing us to become, this is just my personal opinion, I think it's causing us to become more irritable. And I think that's a huge contributor to why we collectively as humankind are having a very difficult time communicating with one another, because we are, so many of us, not everybody, but so many people are so on edge right now. And so when something
don't
comes up,
offend me right now.
yeah, exactly. I think we're so sensitive to like how other people perceive. There's just so much that our brains are worried about that historically I feel like one of the only answers to it, and this is, I'm talking to myself right now, is to put the phone down, to log off and to live your real tangible life. Not to be oblivious to other people's pain and trauma, not to be naive, but to sink your feet deeper into your real life that is happening right in front of you every single day.
Yeah, I think everyone keeps blaming society for this and that, but it comes down to you. Like, you don't have to pick up the phone. You don't have to go on these apps. You don't have to watch the news. Like, you don't have to do any of these things. These things are available, but doesn't mean you have to do anything. And people just forget that. Like, you don't have to bring a phone with you to go out. I mean, it does help, like calling you an Uber and stuff, and that's important, but you don't have to use the phone. Like, when I go out with my friends, we only hang out like once every other month. The only time I use my phone is Uber and to film. I like to film for my YouTube channel, but that's really it. Right. And I have my DSLR. That's all I do. It's right. She's spending her time with me. I'm spending my time with her. I want to enjoy her. Like, nothing upsets me more when I'm hanging out with a person and they're on their phone talking to someone else. Like,
am I not good enough for you? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's disrespectful to me and my time, and it's about, it's a terrible way to go. I mean, there's still people like that will just put the phone down and such. I'm one of those people. Like when I'm at home, I'm on my phone a lot just because, we don't like to be bored. But like when I'm out with friends, I don't hang out with my friends often. So I'm gonna enjoy every single moment, take pictures, have fun with each other, and just, because like my concept is we're all living in our own worlds, and it's all about us at this point. One thing would be like, oh, like how, to like my self-esteem is really high. So like people would be like, how do you feel when people are looking at you on the street? I'm like, I don't really care, because 2 minutes later they're gonna forget about me and I'm gonna forget about them. Like, it doesn't. And then the thing is, most people really don't care about you. They'll care about you for 5 minutes and then they walk away. So that's how I think. Like, that's how I think. I care about someone for 10 minutes and then feel like, why put all this trust? And then with the news, they say that if you watch the news for a week, you're dumb. But if you don't watch it, you're also dumb. And it's like, why watch the news? It's not doing me any good at all at this point. Terrible what's happening around the world. But it doesn't affect me really at all. I mean, yeah, now the gas prices are going up. So I guess it affected me, but like, I can't really do anything about it. I can't complain to anyone. I'm going to call Joe Biden up, and no, I can't do it. I have to accept the situation as it is and just have fun with it, because that's really it. Because, you watch the news all this week, next week could be totally different again. So like, why even expose yourself to that? It's just people just you can just stop it, but people don't want to, and that's really their problem, not mine.
Yeah, I think we're sort of caught in this cycle, right, of needing this constant stimulation. And, I think if we can, like I said, if we can learn to be bored again and be okay being bored, that is sort of the key to relax. I think so much of us just want to relax. And oftentimes...
It's super ironic you say that because you're in the filming business and you have to entertain people like that.
I know. Which is, maybe that's why I have enjoyed and really latched on to this pivot, into the, children's publishing world, being now a children's book writer, is because it's not what I did for, now 13 years professionally. And it's so different, and it's not so like immediate gratification. Like it takes time. And it involves storytelling, which I love. Like that's really the heart of what I love, is telling great stories and impacting people and making people smile and laugh and think through story. But it's not, when you go, like, so much content now is 7 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds long. I personally don't feel, well, I don't want to say you can't tell a story in that amount of time, because that's not fair. But the stories that I like to tell, I cannot be told in that amount of time. I like to really dig in. That's why I like podcasting so much. That's why I agreed to come on your show, is that I love having the opportunity to let a story or a series of stories unfold naturally.
Yeah, when I started podcast, people told me, like, limit your podcast to 20 minutes. And I'm like, you can't tell a story in 20 minutes. Like, I'm going to do this kind of for myself and like expand on a story for an hour. Like, I know the podcast could be a two-parter here right now, so...
Yeah, exactly. Like that's, with the podcast that I co-host with my buddy Eric Peterson, who's an actor, we launched a Christmas podcast last year, and we're like, oh, we got to keep this thing short. We got to keep it to 45 minutes or less. And our episodes, like, we have episodes that are over 2 hours. And honestly, the longer episodes, like, I can see the back end analytics, the longer episodes are the ones that have the largest average consumption rate.
The way I see it, that if you only do 40 minutes and they watch 40 minutes, it stops at 40 minutes. But if you have 2 hours, they're going to continue watching it. But if they stop at 20 minutes, then they stop at 20 minutes. But if you give them more content, they're just going to watch it. So that's how I think of it.
Exactly. If people like you, they're going to listen. And if they've made the decision to listen to you, they're not thinking, I like listening to Joe, but I only like listening to Joe for 10 minutes. No. They like listening to Joe, whether Joe talks for 10 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes, 2 hours and 10 minutes. So that's the approach that I like to take. I don't like feeling married to like what the algorithm likes and whatever it might be, and so much of content dissemination now and distribution is through Instagram, is through TikTok, is through, other social platforms. And it's all this bite-sized content that's like, okay, 10-second video, 10-second video, 10-second video. If that's where the industry is going, I'm happy to pass the baton to that next group of individuals who thrive in that sort of storytelling. And I will happily focus on my children's book series and telling the stories that excite me most.
I mean, it must be difficult for you because when you're in the production world, I'm sure you have hours and hours of footage, but then now you have to limit to 41 minutes because, for one, they have commercials, which everyone hates, and I didn't watch a commercial for like the past 4 years now. But like now, yeah, you're in that loop where you have to limit to 40 minutes, and that's really hard sometimes to limit, hours of content to 41 minutes, make it cohesive story, explaining everything. That's a hard job in itself.
Yeah, it is the hardest part of what we do. I scripted's a bit different just because like the script is the script, and you might have 3 takes. It's just a matter of picking the best take and getting the best reactions. But in the non-scripted world, yeah, post-production across the board, I think, is the hardest part of production. But for us, like you're saying, I might go out and shoot hours worth of content that needs to be edited down into a 5-minute segment for a half-hour episode for, a 60-minute episode. And it is challenging because a lot of times there's really great moments that we just have to cut out of the show just because we don't have enough time. And even though it is the hardest part, and I think it's the truth in podcasting as well. Any storytelling, I believe editing is the hardest part. but it's also the most rewarding because you watch this thing go from all of like, whether it's a story or a podcast or a TV show or whatever, you watch this thing come to life and you see it start from like the most raw form, especially if you're like in the field. And like for me, like if I'm a showrunner, an executive producer, I'm with that project from day one, conceptualizing what the show is going to be and who our cast is going to be and all the stories that we're going to cover across 10 episodes. I get to watch this go from just like ideas on note cards all the way to delivering 10 completed episodes. And I love that so much.
It's a
creating
very
something
amazing
from nothing.
feeling that you can't replicate anywhere else.
It's the best. And what's been fun for me is finding the version of that within what I'm doing as a children's book writer now. You know, when I first started working on the first book in the Capable series, I oftentimes questioned myself because I was like, I'm not a children's book writer. I've never written a book before in my life. Who am I to be doing this? And then when I stepped back and said, okay, I have been telling stories professionally for a long time. I know what makes a great story. Now I'm just doing it in a different medium. And to go from...
Well, now you're also doing kids with a totally different audience.
Yeah, it is. And fortunately for me, you know, it's funny when you look back on your life and you start to understand how all of these places that your life took you can serve you later in life. Because before I got into entertainment, I worked with kids a lot. I started as like a camp counselor at the YMCA when I was 17, you know, worked my way up to becoming a camp director. And then I did after school programs. And then I built and ran a children's activity center with like mommy and me classes and huge play structures. And so I was around kids so much when I was younger, but I never thought, oh, this will serve me someday when I become a children's book writer. No, not at all. But now, as I've written a book and now I'm working on the second book, those lessons I learned, the understanding of kids and what they respond to and how to communicate with them are now coming full circle and have really informed a lot of what I do with the text for the Capables.
So I have here you have Gillette producing credit for its Extreme Makeover, Home Edition, Biggest Loser, MasterChef, Deal or No Deal, and Storage Wars. Did I all prepare you for having a daughter, especially with an 8-limb difference?
Not at all. My work experience as a producer, I would say early days, I think it informed how I reacted when we got surprising news. Because so much of what we do in the production world is, you know, you have an idea for what you're going to shoot. You have an idea for what the story is going to be and how it's all going to unfold. And then reality happens. And now the whole plan changes and you have to be malleable and you have to be flexible and adjust and work productively on the fly. So I think for me, when, you know, I became so hardwired to when difficulty would arise, I wouldn't run away from it. I wouldn't get scared. I wouldn't quit. It was like, okay, how are we going to get through this? So I think in some way it informed the way that I respond to difficult situations. But in terms of like navigating disability, that has been an entirely new experience for me. I would say because I've worked in docuseries pretty much exclusively, if anything, it helped me navigate the process of educating myself because some reality TV is pretty heavily scripted. Fortunately, the shows that I've worked on haven't been like that for the most part. So I come from a journalism family and I love getting to the heart of a story. I want to know the truth. And so that has become a big part of the way I produce and the way I tell stories is I want to know what someone's really feeling. I don't want what you think I want you to tell me. I want you to tell me what is your truth in any given moment. And so when we found out about Emerson and I started getting connected to people within the disability community, I think it served as an asset in my conversations because I think the people that I connected with early days gathered that I wasn't just another parent like so many parents that they had encountered in their life who were just like trying to inspire their child. I was a parent who genuinely was curious and wanted to learn how to be the best advocate and the best ally that I possibly can be, and was also okay feeling uncomfortable, was also okay and still am okay getting it wrong, because I think the only way that we can quote unquote get it right is by willing to get it wrong first.
The way I see you approaching your career and I guess life is that you have a job to do and whatever happens, but you still have to complete your job. But I'm just observing here that it seems that you were more okay when your daughter was born versus your wife who wants to be more, more structured, more everything should go according to plan. Is that fair to say?
I don't know if that's fair to say, because maybe when Emerson was first born, I might have been a bit more okay with it, but was I really okay with it, I guess, is the bigger question, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think for me and what I do professionally as a producer, so often, all the time, really, we have to appear like we have all the answers. We have to have this like fake it till you make it mentality where you can't ever show your cards and say like, you know what, I don't have that answer, or I don't know how that aspect of what we do works. There's a lot of dishonesty in the entertainment industry. And so I think sometimes that can lead to what I know some people have called like toxic positivity. I don't know if I was ever toxically positive when we found out about Emerson, but I also don't think I was totally honest with myself. And I think I was a lot more fearful and scared than I was willing to admit to myself. And to be totally transparent, it wasn't until, last year when I had a series of panic attacks out of nowhere. I'd never had panic attacks in my life. And all of a sudden I'm at like Disney World in Orlando and the world starts spinning and I feel like I'm going to pass out and I can't understand why. That it was in that moment and then in the weeks and months that followed, talking to a therapist and professionals, that I realized that I hadn't been honest with myself. And I hadn't owned my truth about my fears and my trauma, as I mentioned earlier. And so maybe if you looked at us on the surface back in 2018, it might have appeared that Danny was handling all of it perfectly fine, but I wasn't. I didn't know that at the time. So I don't necessarily fault myself, because it wasn't like I was consciously stressed out all the time, but I wanted to present like I was fine. I think it had just become a coping mechanism for me. And then over time, I realized that coping mechanism wasn't working for me anymore. And so now I'm in a place where I'm very honest about it. And I've become not just a huge advocate for, authentic representation in the media and disability rights and inclusion, but I've become an even bigger advocate for parents being honest with themselves and parents being honest with their children and owning their truth when you're navigating the journey of raising a child with a disability.
Was it difficult for you because you are unveiling yourself, and I appreciate that, but were you able to be this honest with your wife, because she's also dealing with herself and the way she was growing up? So was it that you were able to go to her, or were you kind of separating and then kind of coming together, or like how did that work for you guys?
It really is something that I know that her and I didn't communicate about in a very honest, transparent way until probably over the last few months. Why, I don't know. I frankly don't know. Were we too busy? Were we afraid to be honest with ourselves? And through that, we were unable to be honest with each other. I don't know. It wasn't until I had this sort of breakthrough moment in therapy where I realized that I was afraid of how the world was going to treat my daughter, that it really started opening up the conversation between my wife and myself. And I don't know if it was so much that we were running away from it as much as it was, and it's hard to say because I don't know our life any other way, but, from April of 2020 until really now, we were isolated from the world. These experiences that we more than likely would have had happen earlier at theme parks or grocery stores or the park or school or whatever, of other kids or parents noticing Emerson's limb difference and us having to navigate that with her, would have happened a lot sooner if the world hadn't been shut down. So I think to an extent, now that things are opening up again, now that our daughter started school and we went to Disney World last year and we're starting to see the world reacting to our daughter, I think that has served as really the catalyst for, and I can only speak for myself, but for me personally, really recognizing how I feel. And then through that, my wife and I now talking about it. I don't think it was so much that either one of us didn't want to be honest with one another. I think the reality was we just didn't have the situations come up that caused us to need to have those conversations.
Yeah, it seemed like you needed to have that moment to, I guess, validate what you've been feeling. Because so you go to like Disney World, and I mean, your daughter had the upper limb different, and honestly, that can be easily hidden, or even if you don't hide it, it's not something you see. It's not very apparent. It's like, so how did it feel to be surrounded by people and them looking at your daughter a little bit differently?
Yeah, that was hard. I think the first time we had an experience at the park near our house last year where a little girl and her sister had sort of run over to us, and they weren't running over to Emerson. They saw our dog, and, you know, after they sort of, you know, played with our dog for a little bit, the older daughter, who was probably 5, 6 years old, noticed Emerson's limb difference and, you know, said, hey, her right arm and her right hand are smaller than her left. And, you know, I was like, yeah, that's just the way she was born. And, you know, the little girl reacted with, well, that's weird. And so that sort of presented this teaching moment, and which was great, but that was very isolated.
Wait, a teaching moment for your daughter or for the other one?
For the other one. Yeah. Yeah. I would say my daughter was so young at that point. She didn't register what was happening, but it gave me the opportunity to have a conversation with this little girl about differences and about disability. And, you know, I think so often children will call things they've never experienced before weird, because that's the word that comes to mind for them, you know, and that's why the capables exist, you know, so that way children can get exposed to disability and difference at a younger age. It's the first time it really happened. We went to Disneyland after the park reopened in the spring of last year, and that was the first time I really noticed. You're standing in line, right, for a ride, and, you know, there's a child, and you can. Now I know what that moment looks like, and sort of how it plays out is you'll see a child notice, and they will very oftentimes then immediately approach their parent and they'll ask, you know, like they'll sort of point and ask. That was tough because for me, being the type of person I am, when I can see that it's happening, my instinct tells me to engage and to, you know, rather than people pointing and then sort of walking away and not getting the full understanding, I would rather them just ask a question, you know, of me, you know, as the parent. But, you know, going to Disneyland, having that experience, that was intense. But I think Disney World was different in a lot of ways, because it wasn't just one day, you know, half a day at Disneyland. It was 8, 9 days across the country in a place that we don't spend a lot of time, surrounded by a lot of people, and having a lot of people notice, you know, your child's disability and seeing them react to it. That was hard. And not hard because, again, like I'm ashamed. It wasn't that at all. It's hard because I just want to talk to these people. I just want to have a conversation with them, because I know that conversation can shift so much when you give people the real information. It takes the fear away. And the reality is that I can't just walk up to every person at a theme park and be like, hey, I noticed you're staring at my child. Here's what happened. You know, you can tell your child this. But what I can do is I can write a children's book where there's a hero with an upper limb difference, where these children may get exposed to this imagery and this story and this truth at a younger age, where maybe it's not them seeing my daughter at the theme park for the first time, but maybe it's another kid who's like my daughter. Or maybe it's an adult, you know, who has a similar limb difference to Emerson. And so that's what I'm committed to, is doing everything I can to share the story of the capables with the world, to give books away if I have to, just to ensure that it ends up in more libraries and classrooms and homes around the world. So then through that, it ends up in the mind of more children, and then eventually more adults around the world. So that's what I can do, and that's what I'm committed to.
Yeah, it's commendable. But I do like the advice that I give to that we're all living our own worlds, and we'll just forget about that person. So like I know, like when you saw that parent with a child, and you probably thought about it all day or the rest of your trip, but I bet you that person wasn't even thinking about you after the ride.
Right. You're 100% correct.
Like I think if the sooner you enter that mindset that most people don't really care about the situation, the less you'll just be at ease with yourself. Just because you're not marinating on that thought for a whole day. It's just apply it to you. Like, see, I don't know, a beautiful woman. Like, maybe you see her and you see her for a minute, and then an hour later, you totally forget about them. Or do an example of you film a video. Like you were there, you're filming a video, watch it a day later. Will you remember everything that happened in the video? No. You'll be like, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Our mind just loses its memory, and it's just not important. But like, do you feel like you're in a place that you have to protect your daughter? Or do you kind of just, so this is how life would be for the rest of her life?
I mean, I think I instinctively am a very protective person. I have 2 younger sisters, and I've always been protective of them. I'm the oldest of 5. So I think it's always been in my code to look out for, people that I care about, specifically the, women, the girls in my life. And so I think that is definitely transitioned into me as a parent. I am protective of my children, as I think the vast majority of parents are. Obviously, there is this additional layer of, Emerson having a disability. And I think what's important for me is to figure out how to balance me being just, generally protective as a parent, as comparatively speaking to protective of a child with a disability. And what I'm do my best at is knowing that I will never navigate the world like Emerson does. I will never have to navigate the world as a person with a disability. So I can't understand what that's like. But what I can do is I can provide a safe space, a safe home for my child to grow up in, so she is as confident in herself as she possibly can be, and she feels empowered, and she feels safe. So that way, when she does inevitably encounter moments, whether it has to do with her disability or just being a human being navigating the world that are a bit more challenging, that she's able to navigate those times with strength. And when there are times that are a little bit harder than others, and maybe the strength isn't enough, that she knows that she has a safe space to go to express herself, and to know that she can be honest with us, and that we will listen and we will be there.
Yeah, I did want to re-emphasize a very great point that Danny said. We can all agree that the world is shit and we're all going to have really tough moments in our lives, but what is important is a safe place for them to come back. Because I definitely talked to a lot of people where the world was shit to them, but they also didn't have a place to go, at home. And I was one of the people that I didn't want to go home just because my parents, it's not that my parents didn't understand me, but they didn't understand me, but they did understand the complexities of my mental health and the way they were saying things to me. And so that really made me that just didn't want to go home, but I had to go home because it's my home and they pay for a roof over my head. So it's like that, but it's just, I did without a place to go where I could feel comforted and just feel safe for a little while again. And you also don't want to, it's also tricky because you also don't want to be in a place where it is a safe place, but that they always run away to you guys either. That they have to just accept that the world will be shit, but there are also good things about it. And just because you had one bad moment doesn't mean, you should just come home and never leave the house again. Because we all know as parents, we don't want that. So it's tricky. I do say it does definitely start in the home, and then just create that solid foundation of self-esteem, the good decisions, and then hopefully that carry into the outside world. But yeah, it's very difficult to be a parent, to talk to them in a realistic tone, because you don't want to be mean to them either and like push them out. That's why one of the things that why I don't want to be a parent, because I feel like I would just be too protective of them, where the point of a parenting is that you want to raise them enough where they can go out and be independent. So if the parents die, they'll be okay. You don't want them to be, struggling and such. So that's where it's difficult for me to want to be a parent, especially with a disabled child, because there always will be those shitty people out there, or situations where they'll just not fit in or be able to do, or just, I don't know if you ever heard of the word ableism.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so there can be some of that. So it's stressful, and it's stressful for you just learning your child and dealing with the outside world, raising them. It's just, I don't know how parents do it sometimes. Some will have kids at 16 years old, which is blasphemy to me. I don't know how. It's just, I don't know like how.
Yeah, I
some
don't think
people
they're. I don't
choose
think
to
they're
have kids.
planning it. I don't think they're like, oh, I want to go out. I mean, maybe some are, but I don't think they're thinking, oh, I want to have a child at 16. I think it's just kids are. You feel invincible when you're young, and you don't think of the consequences and repercussions of your actions. Sometimes that can lead to
Yeah, like I don't want to be the
having a
one.
child.
Yeah, but I don't want to be like child can't hold to a grudge for a long time. So I don't want to be like them. Like I didn't give them ice cream one time, and they're gonna bring it up to the day I die. Like like you're going to the nursing home because you didn't give me that ice cream. I'm like, come on, really? At one
That
decision
escalated
could,
quickly. Yeah.
yeah, like one decision could just change the course of their lives, and I can't live with that.
Yeah, it's a lot. Your mind is constantly sort of like spinning around about everything you say and everything you do that influences your child's life. And I've known for a long time that I wanted to become a parent. I think, again, being the oldest of 5 and coming from a big family, I just always felt called to be a father in my life. And there have been so many aspects of being a parent that have been incredible. But when you have just one and they're a baby and they aren't running around and they're on a pretty set schedule, there are very difficult, challenging moments. Don't get me wrong. But like, there's also a lot of like easy moments that you don't realize are easy until they're older or until you have a second. And now that we're in this, chapter of our life where we have a 3.5-year-old plus we have a 6-month-old, it is just, your mind is constantly busy all the time, not just making sure that they're safe and that the house is taken care of and that the bills are paid and all this sort of stuff. But it's like realizing that the reactions that you have to anything that goes on in any day to day when you're driving, the way you talk to somebody who cuts you off, or the music you listen to, the way you talk to your spouse, your significant other, your partner, all that is being downloaded by your children every single day. It makes you so much more aware of who you are and the way that you present in the world in a way that, frankly, I never thought about to this extent until I became a parent. And it is a mind F, and it is exhausting, but also as challenging as it is when you look at your child and you see them finding themselves and becoming themselves and maybe liking some of the same stuff you like or finding things that they like, making friends, realizing they have a voice, realizing they can make you laugh. That is just watching your children. We just had a moment recently that I posted on my Instagram of one of our youngest is like, learning to sort of hold herself up on her stomach. And so our oldest, Emerson, will like lay down in front of her on her like elbows, and they'll just stare at each other and they laugh at each other. They don't say anything. They just laugh. And once one starts laughing, the other just giggles. And those moments are some of the most beautiful moments that I'll have in my life. So as much as it sucks when Riley is up every 2 hours in the middle of the night screaming, and when your child gets sick or they yell at you and they tell you no, when you see your 2 children looking at each other and just giggling and knowing that they're going to have a bond, hopefully, for the rest of their life, it will far outweigh the challenging times forever.
Nope, no kids here.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to hard sell you there, Joe. I was trying to hard sell you.
No, I don't think it's worth it. But so let's go back to what we were trying to do. Is it safe to say you had no experience with the disability community till your daughter was born, basically?
Oh, I think I had experiences
because we
with...
all know the disability community is a whole different beast.
Yeah, to say I had experience with the disability community, I didn't have like close friends who identified as people with disabilities, or people who are very outspoken, advocates within the disability community, where I was having very, deep, insightful conversation. I had interacted, a pretty fair amount with people with disabilities. Like when I was a camp counselor at the YMCA, I had multiple, children who had visible and non-visible disabilities that came through my camps there. And, that was definitely a learning experience for me, because I didn't go to college to learn how to sort of navigate certain moments that might come up with someone who has autism or Asperger's or whatever it might be. Those were all foreign situations to me that were challenging in that moment. It's an 18, 19-year-old kid trying to, figure out how to diffuse, someone who's neurodiverse, who's having a challenging moment. that was hard, but then as I got older, I was on the board of a nonprofit that was doing work in the blind community, or people with low vision, where our mission was to put Braille and scanners in grocery stores. So if people who were blind or had low vision wanted to go grocery shopping on their own, they could. And so we had like Braille signs and Braille maps and all this sort of stuff. So it's something that I've always felt like I wanted to do whatever I could and lend, my skill set, my voice, my time, my energy to advocating for the disability community. But in terms of like having very deep conversations and becoming educated and learning just how nuanced things are, that wasn't something that happened until we found out about Emerson. And that just flipped, a lot of things in my life on its head, and it changed my focus and the work that I'm passionate about.
Before we wrap this up, do you ever apply the deal or no deal at home? So like, for example, I can offer you a cookie, but you have to go to bed early. Deal or no deal?
That is a great question. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked that. I actually, not too long ago, I think, I don't remember what I was asking Emerson if she wanted to do. I think I was like, hey, so time for lunch, deal or no deal? And she immediately said to me, no deal.
And then she closed the box. And
yeah, she closed the box, and then it went, and the lights came back up, and Howie Mandel walked out. No, I have said like that to her before.
You could look like Howie Mandel if you have the ball cap.
There, look. How about if I do that?
There you go.
For the listeners at home who can't see me through audio, I'm putting my hands over my hair to represent what I might look like. In a few more years, I might be like Howie.
I mean, you're lucky to have a full head of hair. I was balding at like 25, so.
I never thought I would have this much hair at nearly 40. My hairline started receding when I was like 18, 19 years old. And for some reason, it just sort of stopped. I don't know why. Probably because I took Propecia for a little while. Maybe that helped. I don't know.
Well, all the guys are jealous of you right now.
I know, it's so funny because like when I look at my hairline, all I can see is like the parts that have been receding. But, we're our toughest critics. So anyway, that's not why people are listening to this podcast, is to hear about my hairline.
So or another example I have here is when your wife was coming home after birth. So do you go, move that bus?
I think the last thing you should ever say to a woman is move that bus. That just feels like a line we may never want to say. If you want your wife to be happy with you or your significant other, never scream at them, move that bus.
No, I meant move that bus in terms of like the bus would cover
like move
the
house. Car?
No, it would cover in the house, yes. And then they move that bus, and then, I don't know, you have like flowers or something.
I never did that after the baby was born, but my wife and my daughter, Emerson, did get to come to one of the reveals, the Move That Bus moment for our reboot season of Extreme Makeover Home Edition. And that was really cool. Somewhere on my social media, I have a picture of the three of us standing next to that iconic bus, but I've never shouted it at home. Maybe I'll do that tonight, and I'll see how my wife reacts. And if she slaps me, I'll make sure to tell her it's your fault.
I wanted to stick to the disability aspect, but I have so many questions about Extreme Makeover because that was huge like 10 years ago. So I remember Sunday night, 8 p.m.
It was one of the biggest shows on television. I didn't work on that original run of the show. I did the revamped new Extreme for HGTV that was on back in 2019, 2020. But it was an incredible show to be a part of, and it was one of those shows that I think as a producer you sort of dream of being a part of those moments that really change people's lives, for the better. And I was very, very grateful to be a part of it.
I heard a lot of the houses were actually shit, that they weren't made well at all because you can't build a house in 7 days.
I will tell you that the houses that we built were great quality. I think, I can't speak to anyone who's lived in those houses or, previous seasons of the show, but I was on site and we worked with very credible home builders. And the thing is, even if there's issues with the house after the fact, the homeowners are still in contact, and all the warranties exist for everything that's in that home, from plumbing fixtures to lighting, fixtures, whatever it might be. All of that is covered should they have any issues.
Yeah, I just thought like a lot of things for one, they can get robbed really easily because everyone knows what's in the house. Two, sometimes the value, since they can't afford the housing anymore because they go from let's say 4,000 square foot house to 15,000. Like, how can anyone afford that, especially for the family that can afford that much?
Yeah, with the reboot of the show, the houses were much less like those like McMansions that you saw, that had like a water slide and all these like theme park things in the backyard and bowling alleys. We did much more like attainable homes this time around, and 5 of the homes were actually remodels. They weren't like full like knockdown rebuilds or like brand new construction. So they were much more like realistic, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath sort of homes that, ensured, like you said, that the people moving in, didn't get hit with massive property taxes.
Yeah, and I also want to say there's always, speaking of people, you look like the guy that was the host of Extreme Makeover, whatever his name is.
Oh, Ty Pennington.
Yeah, there you go. There's your 4th guy.
That was the one actually that I was trying to think of earlier. This has come full circle of some of the other celebs. It's sort of funny because before I got into producing, I was doing hosting work, as I shared earlier, and my first agent as a host was the woman who represented Ty Pennington and was his agent when he booked Extreme Makeover Home Edition. So there was this really sort of wild full circle moment for me when we were doing Extreme for HGTV, because we had Ty come back for a couple episodes as like a surprise guest. And there was one build we were doing out in the Palm Desert here in Southern California, and we were doing the house, but then we were doing like a play structure in the development. And Ty and I, because we didn't have a ton of volunteers that day, I jumped in. And Ty and I were like mixing concrete together and like pouring footings for this play structure. And it was just this wild sort of full circle moment where we had the same agent. She wanted me to be the next Ty Pennington. Now, all these years later, I'm producing Extreme Makeover Home Edition that we brought Ty back into. And now him and I are building a playground together. It was sort of a fun full circle moment for sure.
So before I take the mic away from you, is there anything you want to say, promote, any words of wisdom, no winning lottery numbers? The mic is all yours.
Yeah, I would just say if you're interested in learning more about The Capables, you can check out our website, thecapables.com. You can also follow us on all social media platforms at The Capables. If you want to connect with me personally, Instagram is the best place to do that. I'm at Danny Jordan. Depending on when this episode comes out, we have a Kickstarter campaign that is ending on March 18th. So if you want to support us and get a copy of the second book in the series, you can go over and click the link in our bio on Instagram and get connected to our Kickstarter. In terms of words of wisdom, I would just, encourage, people who are in the non-disability community to educate themselves. I encourage everybody to be more inclusive, more empathetic, and do whatever you can to be kind to others. You don't know what anyone else is going through. If we live in this time, in this culture where so often we're just seeing these highlight reel moments of people's lives, and everybody has stuff going on. So I would just encourage everybody to be authentic with what in their interactions and day-to-day life and the social media that they put out, because I think one of the ways that we can lift each other up and spread more kindness is by being more honest with each other and stop contributing to this sort of like comparative culture that we live in. And in terms of winning lottery numbers, 9. I'll just tell you 9. How about that?
Okay. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. Thank you, Danny, for giving me your time and being vulnerable with us. And I'll see everyone next time. Bye.